All right, let's get started here. Everyone take their seat. Good evening. I'm Ed Selich, president of Speak Up Newport, and I want to welcome you to our June program. Speak Up Newport's your forum for discussion of civic affairs. We put on monthly programs like this. We sponsor the annual Mayor's Dinner, and we award scholarships to Colonel Del Mar and Newport Harbor high schools. And we're going to be awarding our annual scholarships next month at our July meeting, so you might want to be here for that. We've got quite a few VIPs here this evening that I'd like to introduce. First of all, from our current City Council, we have Joy Brenner. Joy, you're there. We have Mayor Pro Tem Will O'Neill. Will, in the back. Kevin Muldoon. Kevin. There's Kevin back there. Let's see. Also, we have some of our harbor commissioners here. Bill Kenny. Bill, there he is. John Drayton. John, there's John. Ira Beer. Ira, somewhere. Let's see, who else we have from the Harbor Commission? I guess that's it. Oh, where's Scott? There you are. Oh, all right, sorry. Oh, you guys snuck in on me. Sorry about that. Let's see here. Oh, we have former council member Scott Piotr. I saw Scott. He's so short you can't miss him. Former council member and mayor Steve Rosansky. Steve. And then we have some special guests. I invited some harbor commissioners from Huntington Beach here. Commissioner Bill Larkin. Bill, there he is. And then we have Mike Van Boris. Mike, there he is. And Craig Shopmore. Craig. And if there's any other very important person, I'm sorry I didn't introduce you. Anyway, big thanks to the Bungalow for the good food they put on there. And also, we have these comment cards, so if you happen to be on a seat that has a comment card, we'd appreciate that you fill it out. That's how we know what kind of programs you want to hear. Also, we like to know how you hear about Speak Up Newport so we can do our outreach for our monthly meeting notices. So tonight, our program is on what is the future of Newport Harbor, and will the recent creation of a harbor department headed by Kurt Borsting fulfill the vision of Councilman Marshall Duffield. And as we all know, after 4.5 years on the City Council, Marshall Duffield, or Duffy as we all call him, has been working really hard in the harbor, and we want to know if he's yet been able to fulfill his vision of the harbor. We asked him to present his vision this evening, what he and the rest of the City Council have accomplished to date since he's been on the City Council, the challenges that he's faced in pursuing his mission. And we also asked the new Harbormaster, Kurt Borsting, on how he would implement this vision and manage the new harbor department. And some of the specific things we wanted him to focus on is that Duffy recently called for the establishment of our Harbor Commission by city charter. And, should this be put on the 2020 ballot? What's the status of dredging in the harbor? That's always a big issue for us. What are changes that are proposed in the Harbor Code? I know the Harbor Commission is going through that right now. What's being done to deal with increased usage and crowding in the harbor? What harbor improvements are contemplated? And then last of all, the Harbor Patrol Sheriff is also called the Harbormaster. So how do you manage a harbor with two Harbormasters? So with that, we'll introduce Kurt and Duffy, if you'll take your places up at the table here. And each speaker, Duffy will go first. We'll have 15 minutes to speak, and after that we're going to take questions. I'll field the questions from the audience. We're going to have two gentlemen with microphones. If you'll wait until you have the microphone in front of you before you ask the question, because this is being broadcast on TV so that people can hear you. And be sure to speak directly into the mic, and also state who your question is directed to. And so with that, I'll introduce Councilman Duffy.
What do I do with this guy?
Stick it right in here.
Okay. I'm not a Microsoft or whatever they're called. I'm an Apple guy.
You should have told me ahead of time.
I know. Hope there's nothing bad on there.
Here we go.
Wait a minute, that might not be it. Maybe it is.
That's it.
That's good.
Okay.
Can I just do it from here?
Anywhere you want. It's your show.
Sorry. You're a nice guy. Well, all right. So thank you all for coming, and thank the Chamber for putting this on. Thank you, Ed. Speak Up Newport. Sorry, Speak Up. I thought, really? Well, none of these people like me, so I thought, well, give it a shot. And thank the Harbor Commission for coming. I know you have a meeting tonight, so I appreciate the support. It means a lot to me, as I was on there for 10 years. So, as you know, I've lived on or near the bayfront all my life, and matter of fact, I'm guilty of doing childish things contrary to the role I'm now playing. We had a lot of fun back then. A lot of stuff you couldn't get away with now. So for me, it's kind of odd to be standing up here as Mr. Goody Two-Shoes because we were into everything. So I know all about that stuff. I think you were too, right? But yes, he said yes. So take racing. This harbor has given me so many opportunities, and I'd just like to say take racing sailboats, for example. Being taught how to race a small boat at age 6 gave me independence and knowledge that other kids missed out on. And I was lucky, and it allowed me to see the world and have adventures beyond my wildest dreams. Boats were such a part of my daily life that I knew what I wanted to do, even as a little boy. And not many are lucky to know that, but I did. So I've always been intrigued with boat design and construction, and if it wasn't for this harbor, the little electric boat would not ever have been invented. So back in 2002, Councilwoman Jean Watt walked into my sales office on the Coast Highway to encourage me to consider being on the Harbor Commission, the newly formed Harley Commission. She went on to say I'd be perfect for the task and to please consider. I spent 10 years on the commission, and from that experience, I learned a big lesson. Cities are cities, and harbors are harbors. Unfortunately, it has all been impossible for a city, and for a city manager, to run a harbor and at the same time run a city. Issues about the harbor are very specific, and city managers are not trained in these areas. Grace, our new manager, has been very understanding of the situation and is doing a good job delegating management of the bay to our newly formed Harbor Department and Harbor Commission. Having a Harbor Department overseen by the Harbor Commission and ultimately the Council is a formula for success. Grace, the Harbormaster, and the Harbor Commission will do amazing things together to keep the harbor great. I'm encouraged moving forward that eventually we will have a first-rate, awesome harbor department that everyone can be proud of. Today we are running the department on a shoestring budget because the Bible, Title 17, is being vetted out by the Harbor Commission. Very complicated and takes a long time, but prior to the new department, the harbor management operated on automatic pilot. Complaint-based management was the rule of thumb. Title 17 is the document that explains how everything is going to be handled and who is going to tackle what. Lots has changed over the decades, and changes need to be made moving forward. This is directly related to cost. The department, over the next several months, will finally understand what it's going to take to do the job right and apply expenses to it. Right now, we run on a $1.3 million yearly budget and have only one full-time employee. All the rest are part-time. This is very challenging because getting good, experienced, quality people to work for less than 30 hours a week is hard to make ends meet. So we've lost some really good people because of that. However, hopefully, very soon this will end and we can fill the spots with permanent employees as we grow the department. In order for you to get a better look at what the Harbormaster, Kurt Boyce, oh, you know what? I forgot. I'm not good at this stuff. Hold on. So now you're going to get to see a silly thing if I knew how to do this. How do you go to the next slide?
Get you on the slideshow.
Sorry. I'm an Apple guy.
There you go, and now you'll just use this one to advance.
Oh. Okay. So, there in 1966, in front of my old house in Bay Shores where I grew up, I saw two pieces of styrofoam floating by and built my first boat right there. And she had a fly bridge. I took my go-kart apart, used the steering for that, had my 3-horse Johnson on the back, and I patrolled the upper bay, or we called it the back bay back then. With it drew about 1 inch. But I just throw that out at you to verify the fact that I have been the little Tom Sawyer of our harbor. In order for you to get a better look at what the Harbormaster Kurt Borsting is facing, I listed the harbor issues, not in any order, but here they are. So I'm not going to read them, but there's a lot of them. And if you want me to read them, I can. But maybe I'll just whip through a couple. So patrol boats, fire boats, surf rescue, lifeguard boats, work boats, marker and buoy lights, castaways, property, marine activities permit, transient mooring field up and down Orange County watershed, upper bay, dredging near shore, dredging main channels, removing toxic sediment from the harbor, boat overhang project and pier headlines to find bay water quality, trash management, and so on. It just goes on and on like that. So you can see there are many things to deal with, and the Harbormaster has got to be knowledgeable in all these categories. And you can see how difficult it is for a city manager to handle all this, plus run a city. So I'm the first to ever ask for an economic study of the harbor. The first study took only the first properties around the bay and found an annual income of about $360 million. So annually, our harbor produces $360 million. And that was a very conservative approach. A new report was ordered up and with an approach including indirect income. And this study was done by Beacon Economics, and it showed the harbor's annual income of $1 billion when considering direct as well as indirect. For example, I own I'm lucky to own a property 2 miles from the harbor. We enjoy occupancy rates and values much higher because of our proximity to the bay. Our relationship with the county's sheriff regarding the harbor is sensitive. In '71, Brad Gates took over the harbor department. They became the Harbormaster for Dana Point, Newport Beach, and Huntington Harbor and Alamitos Bay. They provided all the law enforcement and safety inland and up to 3 miles offshore from Dana Point to Long Beach. And their main operating facility is in our bay and has a full marine boatyard in it. The Sheriff Department, in addition to safety and law enforcement, accepted management of all our 1,700 offshore and 800 onshore moorings. It's basically a property management task, not a safety or law enforcement thing. As a result, the management was accomplished in a manner that got the job done, but that was it. Not a lot of attention went into full management of the tenants as it should have, but that was the time of complaint-based enforcement. So they were able to successfully manage the moorings to a level that seemed acceptable. We must understand one basic element to running the harbor safely and smartly. The sheriff is the sheriff, and the harbormaster is the harbormaster. The sheriff is in charge of law enforcement and safety, and the harbormaster is in charge of managing all the aspects of the harbor. One of the biggest complaints I got for many years from people with questions about the harbor was, who do I call? And in the past, if you called the sheriff's department on a weekend, which is the most likely time for calls, and it had nothing to do with safety or law enforcement, they would direct you to the Harbor Resource Department. Well, that department closes daily at 5 and isn't open on the weekends or holidays. This went on for decades, and somehow people accepted it. Today, We have a phone number to call that sends you to one person, and that is in our Harbormaster's office 24 hours, 7 days a week. This will get better as the department gets on its feet, but that's the idea. One place to call with harbor questions. And so phasing with the sheriffs is really important. And the sheriff's department likes to run their ship their own way. And rightly so. Consequently, when it comes to, say, a fire, they have a fireboat and they want to put out the fire. The city has a fire department, but communication between the two is weak. It's not nothing, it's just not what you'd say crisp, fast, and efficient. To say the least, better communication is the goal moving forward. We would like to see a city-owned fireboat run by our trained firemen. This is a normal procedure for most harbors in the U.S. Currently, the 2 fireboats in our harbor are not suitable to put out a large fire. We want to have a much larger and more versatile fireboat, one with a pump, for example, and this is our fire chief's idea, that could pressurize all the water pipes on, say, Lido Island, should an earthquake cut them off from the mainland. And that way, the houses on fire would have at least something to put them out. He shared that with me, and he's 100% behind this concept. We would like to see, for example, a couple of police boats that would enable our officers to go out onto the bay. Currently, we depend on the sheriffs to get our officers out on the bay. So, I want to make it clear that we need, want, and depend on our sheriff's department that works in our harbor. We're not trying to get rid of the sheriffs. No way. The sheriff's role on the water side has changed since 9/11. Homeland Security is now part of their makeup. They have specific boats designed to patrol the coast for drugs and illegal immigrants that they man and operate. We want to support their needs in every way possible, and we believe by relieving them of many harbor tasks not related to safety and law enforcement, they can do their job better and for less money. I'm looking forward to sitting down with our newly elected Sheriff Don Barnes and his staff to improve everything we do with each other. That's the goal. That's the goal. All right, switching to dredging. Obviously, if we don't dredge, we don't have a harbor. And there are 2 dredging areas, the big wide open main channels and the areas along the shore. Main channels are supposed to be dug out to design depth by the federal government. The areas from bulkhead to pierhead is the responsibility of the adjacent property owner. When the Harbor Commission first began, our number 1 issue was dredging. Number 1. Back then, we did not have an eelgrass mitigation plan that was acceptable to the Coastal Commission. And Seymour Beek took on the subcommittee in charge of getting the eelgrass solved. About 5 years later, Commissioner Beek announced he was throwing in the towel. He had explored every avenue, and this is a guy that can get a lot done. I mean, when we were shocked, he just said, can't do anything. So basically, for many years, no one was allowed to dredge. It was awful. It was the talk of the waterfront. What the heck were we going to do? New harbor commissioners and council kept the pressure on staff and the agencies not to give up. The city spent a good deal of money pursuing the RGP 54, in your time, thank you, regional permit that would contain an element of eelgrass mitigation so dredging could resume. An underwater map was developed by actually diving in the water to count every blade, if you can imagine, an acre of eelgrass year after year. Finally, a compromise was reached, and we could begin to dredge again. So currently, we're allowed to temporarily displace about 1 acre of eelgrass per year. And so far, this amount has worked well with those who've needed to dredge. In 2018, we had 58 acres of shallow water eelgrass, up from 58 from 53 in 2016. So in 18 we had more, in 2016 we had less. The mean average is about 37 acres since 2003. And these numbers do not include deep water eelgrass. So if you include deep water eelgrass, we have well over 100 acres of eelgrass in the harbor. We called it seaweed. I'm not sure the value of eelgrass, but I know that lots of small gradations and plants, things start in the eelgrass, in the seaweed. So I respect it, but it's been around and it comes every year. Anyway, so the last main channel dredging event occurred in 2012 and took out 1 million cubic yards of sediment. The deeper water produced much more flow and is a major reason why eelgrass fields have increased. More flushing is good for everything. Fish have come back in groves and all kinds of species I've not seen since childhood. We have starfish, bonita, dolphins, whales, and even albacore, yellowtail, and sea bass have been caught on our harbor. Obviously, the sea lions love it here, solely because it's a giant refrigerator filled to the brim. They eat, on average, 30 to 40 pounds of fish a day and have been growing at 10% per year in population. Something must be good going on with the water quality in a positive way. Our goal is to, now it's telling me to do something. Hold on. No, wait. I guess not. Never mind. Oh, there it is. Okay. Our goal is to work and think like the agencies. You can't argue with them, but you can join their cause somehow, and that's what we concentrate on. What do they want, and how do we give it to them? They love to hear about the higher water quality, so we preach it hard. For example, my hope is that one day we'll have a method of bringing ocean water to the stagnant part of the harbor to increase the flow. This would really positively affect the water quality, so much so it would be amazing to see the results. When I was a kid in the late 50s, the harbor depth was maintained because we did not have sediment flowing in with every rain event. That all changed in 1968 when the company that starts with an I company redirected the flow of San Diego Creek. Preceding storms over the next decade filled up the harbor with sand, reducing the flow and causing the water quality to go way down. We had huge algae plumes, remember, and nitrates running off from the nurseries up San Diego Creek. It was awful. This resulted in establishing an agency to be in charge of upstream runoff for sediment, chemicals, trash, and vegetation. I currently sit on the Executive Watershed Board charged with managing all the water flow from Saddleback Mountain to the ocean. And this body of biologists, engineers, scientists, and Duffy have successfully reduced most of all the bad stuff entering our bay. Not all, but a significant amount. It's huge. Sediment-wise, they have diverted channels, concrete lined them, dug deep basins along the path of rainwater to deposit the sand into deep holes rather than allowing it to get to our harbor. And this has been reducing the shallowing of our bay a lot. The rub is that we must continue to maintain those basins, or when they fill up, and then they're just useless. So finding the funds to do this is what the Watershed Committee does. We must always be diligent in representing our city, because upstream cities have a way of forgetting what they are responsible for downstream. Next year, we'll be installing a magical machine designed to capture trash and vegetation called the water wheel. The contraption will cost almost $2 million. I went up to Santa Cruz last year to the State Water Committee, and they approved $1.7 million for the machine. The device is solar-powered, and Baltimore Harbor has operated the same machine for a few years very successfully. And it can be seen on YouTube if you're interested in watching it in action. Agencies love to hear about beach replenishment. Everyone is worried about seawater rise, so this becomes very important. We are promoting beach replenishment hard. We believe the same pipe that brings in the fresh water for flushing can be used to deposit sand on the top of beaches and into the near shore. Today, instead of replenishing our beaches, we remove the sand from the harbor and take it 4 miles offshore to a federal dump site called LA3. Very expensive. Army Corps is in favor of exploring these possibilities, so that's good. Currently, we are challenged with removing the remaining 1.2 million cubic yards to achieve design depth. We have not been able to complete design depth in decades. The new dredge project is not new. City staff has been working on this and have teed up a shovel-ready dredge project for Army Corps so they don't have to. Most cities and harbors don't do this because of the expense. We are way ahead of the other municipalities by doing this. The project will cost $23 million, and the city has put up $1.2 million. We have pledged more money once the dredging starts. Myself, Councilman Avery, and staff have been to Washington, D.C. 3 times, working with everyone involved who can provide us funds. We believe we've made great headway and are confident we'll get the money. How much of the $23 million, we're not sure. The challenging element in this dredge project is what to do with the 200,000 cubic yards of unsuitable material they won't let us take to LA3. We are working on a solution right now and are proposing it to the Army Corps next week. I'm confident staff will do a good job selling it to them so we can move forward. The short, condensed version is we dig a deep hole, bury the material, and then put good sand on top. This is the only economical, feasible method that makes sense. That covers the main channel dredging, but what about the stuff along the bulkheads and beaches? To move sand back up onto a beach used to require an expensive, time-consuming permit. As a result, we see boats aground at low tide, sitting in their docks because it's just too expensive to dredge. In some cases, sand moves more than twice a year in extreme conditions, and in others, it moves annually. For these projects where the material has sloughed off the beach and needs to be put back, we have a solution. Take the Balboa Island beaches. Folks there love those beaches, but every winter, they go away. Where do they go? Not far. We can now simply push or dredge the sand back up and do it affordably with no permit costs and do it however many times per year it takes. For Balboa Island, once a year is plenty. Other spots differ. The great news is that for small projects, we can do them quickly as needed. And ultimately, what does this do to the harbor? More flow, of course. Better water quality, increased sand height, and happier people who use those beaches. So lastly, I'd like to emphasize the need to protect the Harbor Commission from going away. Yes, right now, the council could simply vote the Harbor Commission out. Not this council, but maybe one in the future. And that would be awful. The new role of the Harbor Commission is to support our harbor department as it grows and needs guidance. Without the advice from this body of volunteers, I believe our harbor will suffer. For that reason, I'm asking the council to change the city charter to include a Harbor Commission. This will make it so a future council cannot remove the commission. Well, I could go on, but I think you've heard enough of me, if that's enough. So thank you. That's the end of report. Damn it. Should I ask for questions or no? Watch it. Tell me I'm not. You removed it improperly. Yes, I did.
Well, I looked at that list, no pressure. Well, thank you all very much for the opportunity to join you today. My name's Kurt, and my first day on the job was December the 10th. And I was excited to come here, and they said, boy, you got to get here as soon as you can. And I found out the reason was that the holiday boat parade started right around December the 10th. And I went to the parade, and I thought, this is a great event. They said, well, we'll see you tomorrow. And I went to the second and the third and the fourth and the fifth parade, and I said, my God, this community loves the holidays. And to a person, well, we used to do it 7 nights. We used to do it 7 nights in a row. But that introduction to the harbor, getting a chance to see the memory making that this 800 acres can contribute to this community was a terrific way to launch my time here, and it was a lot of fun. So what I hope to share with you today, in addition to the councilman's broad vision of the future of the harbor, are some of the day-to-day operations that we're doing today to build this vision, and how we hope our team can serve the community in the future. I'm going to talk a little bit about the department and its early accomplishments, the activities our team is taking in the code enforcement front. I'd prefer to say code education and enforcement. If the city has a set of rules for users, I think our first priority is to educate the community on those rules. And then once we've set the expectation, to enforce as needed. How we can serve in helping visitors for short-term rentals through our facilities and the sub-permitting process. Future areas operationally for the Harbor Department's focus. Ways that we can go out and solicit additional dollars so that while the budget is an area that is going to get further dialogue here in the city, there are opportunities for us to reach out for other monies that may be able to augment the goals more immediate. And then finally, how we can work with this great group of citizen volunteers on our commission and look for their leadership in how we direct the activities of our department. So in terms of the overview of the department, it actually officially started in July of 17, and as we reach our 24-month mark, the simple motto of this department is that we hope to be the ambassadors of the harbor. I like In-N-Out hamburger, and the reason I like In-N-Out hamburger is that they stick to their core competency. You're never going to find a, burger of the month there. They do what they do, and they do it well. And as we look to partner with our law enforcement partners, with the sheriffs, with our rescue partners, with the lifeguards, and our new team, identifying our individual core competencies, I think, will be part of our formula of success. And so as we look to be those ambassadors, educating people about the harbor use, encouraging fair, shared use of the harbor, I think that will be our ultimate mission in this team. We're looking to engage at a greater level with the harbor and the community. And so I want to thank you for this opportunity tonight. Being able to come out and talk to the city about what you're hoping for from the harbor is step one, so that we can respond and deliver. Getting out there and educating folks about municipal codes. This is an activated harbor. Coming from the city of Long Beach, I thought what we were doing in Alamitos Bay and Rainbow Harbor and Shoreline was activation. Boy, did I learn coming here. You've got everything from moms and dads and kids coming out for the first time on a stand-up paddleboard to world-class sailors, folks that are coming out to celebrate the most special days of their family, whether it's graduations or wedding receptions aboard one of the charter fleet, to families that are going out for a day of fishing. And then, of course, all of that activity is happening around a neighborhood. How we can come together and find fair shared use so that that party on the charter boat doesn't disturb the homeowner, that fun that the family is doing it in a way that respects nature, and that the sea lion that's looking for a rest isn't going to damage property or keep families up at night. I'm learning a lot about that in my first 6 months. And then, of course, there's the important environmental focus. The city has already made some very important investments in multiple locations where people can responsibly pump out their vessels so that waste doesn't enter the harbor. There's an ongoing commitment to refresh that equipment ahead of its period where it's going to become failure regularly, so that we can keep that equipment in really sound working order so that it encourages its use. And then in some of the things that the councilman was saying in terms of trash removal efforts, the wheel that's been through a grant effort that's coming, and then what can we do in the event something goes wrong, in the event that there's a spill, for example, in the harbor. So the first thing the harbor did was go out and hire a staff. And as the councilman said, it's a part-time staff largely. We have had some turnover. I'm excited to say we're hiring a new batch of team members that look like they're going to be great contributors to the team into this season and beyond. We also did some very basic administrative work. Taking on the administration of the mooring fields meant moving 40 years of records from the sheriff's office and operationalizing that. And I want to thank Lieutenant Korn and his entire team for just their kindness in my short time here in helping us continue down that road of transitioning that responsibility so that they can focus on their core competency of law enforcement and emergency response. You know, we've got the benefit of a great IT department here in the city as well, where they've developed custom platforms for us software-wise where we can use our modest team as effectively as we can in responding to the harbor's needs. And then we've also had the good fortune of having one of the code enforcement officers assigned to our department. I have heard that the city has a responsive model to code enforcement. And I thought about that, and I thought about my own home. That's the model. If my neighbor's fence is falling down onto my property, I'm probably going to call code enforcement and say, hey, can you come on out here and help me with this situation? And that would be that type of reactive model. And it works in that example. The infrastructure in the harbor that is keeping those thousands of vessels safe, it's all underwater. That neighbor's call of the fence that's falling is far less likely to happen. And because of that, our team is working for a more proactive model where we can work on time frames, regular reminders to our mooring permittees so that they can keep their equipment in good care, their lines in good care, to protect their investment, the investment of their neighbors in the harbor, and the safety of all of those that share it. And finally, the idea of getting the word out. With these modest beginnings, we're going to need the help of everyone. This last weekend, a group of some 300 volunteers came out with, or maybe it was a weekend or two ago, I'm getting my time wrong, came out and did underwater cleanup. You know, hundreds of volunteer divers coming to look and improve the water quality of the harbor. I think they pulled out 4,000 pounds of trash and debris, okay? That type of thing is happening like crazy in this harbor, and we need to be its greatest cheerleaders. I had a group of junior high school girls that came for their spring community service event where they wanted to build and install monofilament recycling bins at locations that fishermen use in the harbor so that that fishing line that doesn't biodegrade doesn't end up in the waterways, choking and injuring animals or damaging outboard motors and props of vessels. Junior high kids that want to contribute to the future and success of this harbor. And we're going to need to continue to look for those allies. And there's a quick picture of some of our newest employees at a recent auction at the harbor office. Rolling out policies and procedures, putting together the type of software that I described, actually outfitting vessels. And the city has been very supportive. While we are working off of an early fleet, including a couple rental boats that were former coach boats for the local rowing youth, the city has assigned dollars where we can go out and buy a few vessels that through capital funds, and that's coming in the months ahead. Doing things as simple as developing a proper map of the harbor so that users and visitors can understand the real estate, understand where the resources like public docks and pump out systems are. Those were simple tools that were not readily available for users of the harbor, and now they are. And then reducing derelict vessels in the harbor. Part of that were through rule changes that were led through the Harbor Commission in order to maintain a mooring, in the past you had to maintain a vessel on the mooring. So if you were a mooring holder and maybe you were really in between boats, you might keep kind of a junky boat on your mooring so that you would be compliant with the rule. Eliminating that rule and allowing people to maintain their mooring even during the period where they're in between boats is just smart. And then a second compromise took place where the city monitors that vacancy, and once a 30-day window opens, the city then can make it available for a guest that wants to have a short-term stay on that mooring to create an affordable option to visit Newport Beach. And so there are tiers for visitors. You can come to Marina Park and have what I think is probably one of the premier experiences of a guest boater and a guest marina for $80 to $110 a night. Or you can visit a mooring, and let's say you have a 40-foot boat at $1.25 a foot. Now it's a $50 experience to visit Newport Harbor. Or you can use the anchorage, and if you promise to stay aboard that boat almost the whole time you're here, you get a few hours to provision, it's free for just a few days, a 3-day maximum in that case. So the opportunity to provide layers of use of the harbor so that we can invite lots of people to experience this great resource is something that is really terrific. Our code enforcement efforts, this is statistics since the beginning of this fiscal year. And the cases open and cases closed rates are good. Some of this is just as simple as equipment that needs to be checked upon to make sure it continues to be safe, all the way to noise abatement issues where maybe someone has those visiting sea lions and they haven't come out and addressed them in a timely manner. And I'm happy to share that most of these situations get resolved successfully with responsible boat owners and permittees in the harbor. In a few isolated cases, it has resulted in permit revocations. But what I can share with you is Matt Cozyline, that's leading this effort, is giving every opportunity for people to have a successful outcome, and in most cases they are. What we're doing now is we're spending some time on public dock time zone education. The city has a great capital improvement project that's happened over the years where there are 11 public docks dotted throughout the harbor where folks can stop for a quick pickup of a friend, a 3-hour stop to pick a meal up or enjoy a neighborhood, and in some cases 24 and 72-hour zones if you may be a mooring holder and you have a unique situation where you need to leave your shore boat for a period of time. But making sure that we educate and enforce that standard lets the entire community take advantage of that resource. Without that education and enforcement, people may tend to over-monopolize it, treat those same public resources as storage, and that's not fair to anybody. Our staff is also focusing on expired mooring overhauls because there's risk management involved there. If that equipment were to degrade and boats were to break free, they can cause problems with life and property. And finally, there's an outreach to the business community. And I don't want to sound negative, but bad things can happen on the water. And developing strong partnerships with our business community is not only important for their success, the safety of people that come to visit Newport Beach, but also the reputation of this harbor and into the future. It was just a year or two ago that in Missouri, on the Lake of the Ozarks, a commercial operator went out in inclement weather and 19 people perished because of that decision. There's serious reputational damage in addition to the tragedy that can affect those communities for many, many years to come. Working with our community of business owners so that they continue to be responsible and help people have a great experience. And sometimes it's silly things. We send people out on these stand-up paddle boards. They rent it for 2 hours. And they head down, and they're having a blast. And they go an hour, I better turn around. It's time for me to go back. But they've been going with the wind and with the tide. And they turn around and realize they're never going to make it back in that next hour. Working with our business community on just simple things like instruction to folks, making sure that they have the proper personal protective equipment in terms of life-saving equipment on those rental equipments, and that they get proper instruction. Those are the types of messages that are going to happen through our marine activities permitting process. It's practical, and it's in everyone's interest in this community. I mentioned what a great place this is for visiting boaters, and it's locals and visitors alike. The photo on the left is a local yacht club that basically had a staycation in the 23-slip marina, okay? They had a blast, and I'm happy to show the other photo from Memorial Day weekend where we had another full house at the marina. These folks are spending money in the community. They're having a great experience. We're using a Likert scale, and these show you some year-to-date numbers, where you can see in the Marina Park slip rentals, for example, in the 11-month period, we have over 3,000 night uses. We have room to grow. The inventory, we can support up to 8,000 night uses if it was a full house 365 days a year. Seasonal nature of boating, that's not going to happen, but we have room to grow in continuing to serve more people. I was starting to say we're doing a Likert scale satisfaction survey of folks that actually use these public facilities. Strongly agree, agree, disagree, strongly disagree in terms of your experience. Overall satisfaction, the quality of your experience, the appearance and condition of the facilities, how was your experience with staff, and would you come back or recommend our facilities to others? We're in the 90s and 80s in all of those. And if you add the next layer, we're at almost 100% in terms of being on the positive end of that scale. I want to thank that part-time team that my predecessor developed on our behalf and that we've continued to nurture in my short time here. These folks care about this harbor, care about delivering quality service to the folks who visit. I'm very, very proud of the work that they put in every day. And I think the numbers reflect that. We also have a unique community of folks who actually reside on the harbor. There are 51 permittees who call the harbor home. They live there as their primary residence. This can be a very effective tool for the harbor as sort of an opportunity to have a neighborhood watch of sorts, where they can help be additional eyes on the waterways to look out for property, for something that might be a navigational concern, or a suspicious activity that they can report to our team or law enforcement. But this is also a group that we want to meet with very regularly. We want to make sure that people are being responsible in, if you're living aboard your boat, are you making your way to those public pump out facilities, or are you engaging the services of a private firm to come out to your boat so that you can get that material off your boat responsibly? And so once a year, every one of those live aboard boaters comes to our office for an inspection of their vessel, making sure that their systems are working. We deposit a dye tab at that time to make sure that there's no leaks in the system. And I think there's more that we can do. We need to be doing more than just collecting registration and insurance. We need to be having a lot of dialogue with this community and ask for their help, because they've got a wonderful limited resource with these 51 permits. And so we hope that everybody understands that's a privilege, and we want to continue to treat it as such. Areas of focus in the future, what we're doing today, getting out into the community, telling our story of these early months, what we hope to do in the future is a big part of it. And that outreach is through public meetings, media opportunities, what we can do on social media, and things as simple as signage. The photo here of a Marina Park staff person who repainted one of the local public docks so that people that want to use that know which area they're allowed to stay in for certain time zones. If you can't effectively communicate that in a simple way, how do you expect somebody to follow the rules? And then there's the photo of the sea lions below. And once we find them in a situation like that, we're reaching out to the vessel owner, asking them to quickly do a humane deterrent so that the homeowner that lives adjacent to that vessel isn't going to hear those three guys fighting for space at 2 in the morning, and that's exactly what will happen. I mentioned that there are dollars out there, and through the Division of Boating and Waterways, there are opportunities for grants. The city successfully applied for $125,000 in grants to get rid of derelict vessels on the harbor. These aren't only visual blight, but they're safety concerns, because those are vessels that could sink, that could dispense things that we don't want to in the harbor. And during this first grant cycle, 26 vessels were removed using these $125,000 worth of funds. And the 3 that are pictured here, I'm particularly proud to see go because they've been here a long time, and some of these 3 vessels were here since 2016-17. And so I'm happy to report all of these are gone. The harbor, the city rather, has reapplied for $175,000 through an upcoming grant cycle. We expect to hear back whether or not we are successful with that. And that's not only available for derelict vessels that the city comes into possession through impounds, but if somebody wants to voluntarily turn in a vessel that's reached its natural life cycle end, through a process, you can see if that qualifies for some of these grant funds as well. A oil spill response equipment grant was successfully achieved earlier this year. We got $35,000 worth of equipment and training. I have to thank my predecessor for that, but it arrived during my watch, and we had a successful training and media event, and our chairperson from the commission and the mayor were there to receive it. We've been working with our lifeguard colleagues that will help deploy this equipment, as well as with the sheriff's department. They sent representatives to attend this. They applied for the same grant. If they are successful in receiving a second response trailer, I'm hopeful that we can develop mutual aid agreements where in a situation where we have a very serious response, we can look for their assistance with their booms and deployment, and we can do the same for the sheriffs in areas that are not our responsibility. Lastly, but certainly not least, is the commission that leads our efforts. This sounds corny, but this is the finest group of volunteers I've had an opportunity to work with in my 30-year career. These people treat these volunteer experiences as if they were full-time jobs, and they're the smartest people in the room. Whether it's advocating for the dredging that the councilman talked to with our federal elected officials, looking for ways that we can provide greater amenities or improvements to our management systems, looking through the rules of Title 17 to make sure that they guide and serve this community well, or how we work with the business community, or lastly, working on the long-term vision. And I'm going to end my remarks on that. A series of long-term vision sessions are being hosted by these commissioners, a couple pictures here, where they are engaging. They're actually a lot of fun, and you get to come and have an hour or two with other members of your community to talk about what you want your harbor to be. And those are informing their decision making. So I want to, again, thank you for this opportunity. Wish you good evening, and I hope I can continue to contribute in the way that this harbor department has done in its first 2 years. Thank you.
Okay, Duffy and Kurt, can you take a seat at the table there? So we've run a little long. We have time for a few questions. So any questions? Jim?
Microphone, yes.
It's right there.
Oh, thank you.
Got one on each side.
The question for the, is there a website where we can go online and look for Harbor Department update that would give this information that we could all look at again and to discover if we have some questions or other details?
I think that's an excellent suggestion. I'll be happy to put this presentation on our website. It's not currently available, but that's simple. There is a section of the website that I would encourage all of you to go to. If you just go to the main URL, the Newport Beach, website, then you'll see that last slash. After that, you can simply type in the words Title 17, and it'll bring you to another section of the website where it talks about all the public outreach that's happening from the commission as they look at the rules that govern the harbor. And if you want to contribute in the process, that webpage is probably the most important one that you can find. And if you can't make one of the scheduled meetings, that website actually has provisions for you to provide written feedback that gets reviewed prior to every public meeting where the commission is looking into these issues of the various rules associated with the harbor.
Okay, another question.
Thank you. Kurt, would you provide a little information about your experience prior to coming to Newport? Thank you.
Well, it's fair. Can people hear me? Okay. I would say I have what I would call an unconventional background to this role. So the first 25 years of my professional life, I was a college administrator. I worked at the California State University system for the 501c3 nonprofits that were led by student government. We operated student unions, recreation centers, and children's centers. And my career was primarily at Cal State Fullerton. But it was a great training ground for what my wife calls my midlife crisis when I moved to the city of Long Beach, and I helped manage the 3 public marinas at that facility, Alamitos Bay, Shoreline Marina, and Rainbow Harbor Marina. In that, in my first career, I worked with boards, but they were student boards. There wasn't a commission, it was a student union board that was running the activities of that student-funded facility. But it was a great training ground for citizen governance, because as they ran those facilities in the same way that you should run your harbor. We also were involved in debt financed projects, and the reason that I think I got the job at Long Beach is that they were doing a $100 million rebuild of the marina at Alamitos Bay, and it was all debt finance construction, repaid by the slip holders. And so I had a great opportunity there for 4 years, and then was fortunate enough to get this position here. So that's my background.
Okay, another question. Phil?
Could you tell us what your vision is in terms of the administration of the shore-based civic moorings? The American Legion comes to mind, or the Lido Isle Yacht Club lease, or even the private yacht club mooring fields. How do you see the administration of those business relationships so far as the Harbor Commission is concerned?
Yipes, I'm not sure I understand the question. So I don't know of a mooring field off, are you talking about the mooring field off the American Legion? Or?
No, I'm talking about, in terms of the American Legion Yacht Club as an example, with their shore-based moorings, do you see the Harbor Commission as the administrator of shore-based moorings that are in public tidelands?
I'm still trying to see a shore mooring at the, where you're talking about. There are no shore moorings at the American Legion. You mean the offshore moorings?
The offshore
Offshore moorings.
Yeah, the offshore moorings that are otherwise linked to public property.
Linked to public property. You mean our public docks?
That are now
Sorry, I'm just not smart enough to figure out what you're asking.
Well, I'm just trying to see. Do you see the Harbor Commission including in their administrative work those moorings in addition?
Absolutely, right. So I was on the subcommittee for the relocation of the boundaries of all the harbor fields, and it took 7 years. It's the longest subcommittee that ever lived, I think. And so I'm very, very well aware of the rules and how, and all the outreach that went into forming these mooring fields. And I will have to say it was quite a process. And again, the volunteers on the Harbor Commission and on my committee, there were probably 30 of us here. I imagine there's might be 1 or 2. Anybody here that was on that? There's one, Carter Ford. Carter will remember how hard we worked. I really didn't work that hard. I just ran the meetings, and you guys did all the hard work. So management of all of those moorings and such are very important to the Harbor Commission, important to the stakeholders that are involved in it, and they're constantly working to improve. And my goal really is to offer more amenities to those mooring holders, because they need, I hope this is answering your, I don't know if I'm swaying off, but what these people need is a work dock. Imagine not being able to have a dock that you can go tie up to wash your boat off. You can't really wash your boat off out in the moorings. There's no water. So we have extra space where we could allow that to happen. That way, the asset would be kept better, the quality of the tenant would be better, and they would use the boat. We want people to use boats. When Kurt and I see a boat out there that you wouldn't put your wife or girlfriend on and take a little cruise, you realize, well, that's just storing a piece of junk, really. We want to help the mooring owners so that they can have their boats working and enjoy them, and that requires shore boats, if there is such a thing. My goal is to try and put a shore boat like we have at the Balboa Yacht Club. This might be what you're getting at. And at the Newport Harbor Yacht Club, we have parking, we have a work dock, and we have a shore boat. And consequently, the people use those boats way more. And this is what we want to provide instead of just abandoning them, which is not good. Thanks.
Okay. Any questions over here? Over here? Yes, ma'am. No, wait for the microphone, please.
Since we've put all this work into our harbor and are taking such pride in it, I was wondering where the city council is on passing a resolution to block offshore drilling because of the financial danger to our community, where we are such a water community. Many of our neighboring cities have already passed that resolution.
Right, so it hasn't come to us, so I'm afraid to talk about it, but obviously I think there isn't a whole lot of movement to do that, to start offshore drilling. But you're right, it's something coming to us shortly, and I haven't been able to discuss that with my colleagues, but it's coming. It's a good question.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? There's one in the back there.
With the advent of the increase in the number of paddleboard usages, the inner channel example being around Balboa Island, we're seeing a lot of activity there of paddleboards and kayaks. Now we're also seeing, and over the years, we've seen a lot of activity of very large boats going through there. And we just kind of see that as a potential disaster heading our way. Is there a possibility of looking at restricting the size of boats, except for those going to their moorings, of accessing the inner channel?
Who do you direct that to? Okay, who wants to take that one?
Well, I'll give it a shot. So I would think that there would be very difficult to enforce that request, and it would require, full-time. That seems to be something that I don't know if we've actually approached that need quite yet. But what I'm hearing you say, have you had personal experiences where you've been where you've seen collisions, or you've seen near collisions, or how did you come to this conclusion? All the time.
Well, now that I have a better understanding of what you're saying, I mean, one part of this sort of cheerleading that I'd like to encourage is we need to hear from you in those circumstances where the councilman shared we want to have sort of this one-stop shop, one number to call model. One of the things that we need is for people to call and bring these items to our attention. The IT folks, as I had mentioned, have developed a really robust system where we have ability to log activity right from the vessels themselves, but it's that data that's going to help us with future decision making. I got to meet with the U.S. Coast Guard recently. There's some interest in the sailing community to replace some of the large dolphin piles in the harbor with floating versions of those same federal markers. And the representative from the Coast Guard was reluctant. And I said, well, why are you reluctant? This is a great idea. We'll replace this big fixed thing for a floating thing, and it won't hurt the sailors anymore. Well, he said, well, there's 10 or 15 years left on its usable life, and so we amortize the usable life. But beyond that, you don't have enough data of incidents where the dolphin pile created damage with sailboats. And so being able to have more data gives more convincing cases, whether it's the example with the federal government, with this fixed dolphin pile, or with your neighborhood concerns, so that we can dispatch our staff out there more often to keep an eye on it and record those types of things that could lead to a policy change. So please call. Yes, that is the number. That is the number. Yeah.
Okay, we got one more question in the back. Last question. Wait for the microphone, please. You do.
He doesn't.
Obey the rules.
My eyes aren't what they used to be. So we used to have these little LED lights on buoys in the bay, and we don't have those anymore. I was wondering if my poor eyesight is missing something, or are they gone? And are they coming back?
I'm going to let Kurt finish, but I want to say that yours truly has bashed into those unlit markers numerous times, and it's quite embarrassing because everybody on the boat goes, "Well, you're Mr. Boat. Why'd you crash into it?" You know, so, well, okay. Mostly because I couldn't see it, okay? But I do know where they are, but I still bash into them. And it came to my attention finally to say, we got to do something about this. So I was able to come up with an idea, and I passed it on to an Eagle Scout. And he took it on as a project. And I'm going to let Kurt finish.
Well, I was dying to tell part of this story too, because yesterday I got a chance to meet that Eagle Scout and his dad. And the long and the short of it, it was apparently a very well-received Eagle Scout project, that they lit something like 20 markers in the harbor. And some of them were that are maintained by a race association, some of them on county markers, some of them on city markers. And without getting too bureaucratic, they were removed because it was learned there was a Coast Guard permit requirement associated with those things. But here's the good news. Here's the good news. In an early meeting I had with the Coast Guards, the folks that are responsible for aids to navigation here locally, I asked them about this, and they looked at the lights and they said, you know, there is a permit requirement for these types of things, but it's pretty low level, and we expect it would get support. And so the reason we met with the family is I didn't know exactly where these things were put in the harbor. But this young man and his dad had this wonderful record of their project and where they were located. We now have that all mapped out. We're going to return to the shared stakeholders because we're going to go back to that racing association. We're going to go back to the county. We're going to make sure our harbor commission supports placing them back on the city ones. And then if we get yeses at each of those three stakeholder groups, we'll go to the Coast Guard this time and cross every T and dot every I. There may be some bumps on this road. It's bureaucracy. We may find out there's a process that we need to deal with the association or the county, but I'm hopeful we can get those back. And I'm so impressed with the volunteerism. I mean, meeting that young man and his dad and the level of commitment and investment that they made in the harbor. Oh my God, they were telling me, oh, we still have a lot of the supplies in our garage. We'd be happy to donate them to the city. And so hopefully those aren't too far away. And so
He's good, isn't he?
All right, well, let's give our speakers a big hand here. Appreciate them coming. Thanks, guys, so much. All right, I want to thank the bungalow again. Don't forget the comment cards. Please fill those out. Our next month's program is July 10th right here, so come on back and join us for our next month's program. Good evening.